It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning the week was almost over and spring break would finally be upon us, so everybody was getting antsy in their seats, I could tell. We didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers, so my teacher, in the middle of class, just decided to start playing games with us on Sparkle.com. He was a very laid-back teacher like that. As we were doing some brand Lego quiz on Sparkle, I remember the exact moment it happened. Right after my friend answered a question. I remember the exact question too. It was Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. He sounded panicked and frantic as he told us of the teachers, as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown. I actually got the chills. I got goosebumps on my arms. As usually our laid-back teacher, he seemed way too panicked as he ran off to go turn off the lights and ushered us in the back of the corner of the room. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes, and then the usual buzzing that came from the panel in the back of the room ceases, indicating that the school cut off all of the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be so serious. We were so scared. A few more minutes of waiting later, and we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started bawling their eyes out, which even more scared us so much. As the screaming got closer and closer to the classroom, the lunatic-sounding man started banging on all of the lockers, screaming, "I'm gonna kill you all!" It was that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door, and that's when one of the girls screamed, "No!" The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up!" 2 of the girls in the classroom were crying out loud now. It felt like an eternity. That man was pounding on the door, but eventually he finally continued down the hallway, screaming like a mentally insane person. Eventually, we didn't hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the dean came. He explained that apparently some mentally unstable person entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming. They weren't sure if the man was armed or not. Now, this was before the school had cameras, unfortunately, or could afford proper security, so the school was wide open for a security risk like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all of the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him, so the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching, but to keep all the doors locked and do not let any students leave for any reason. The most disturbing part, though, however, is that one of the janitors working that night found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back of the school, and according to the rumors that were spread by my peers, there was a .44 Magnum sticking from his pocket. The janitor must have done something to wake him up, because the door of the closet was open whenever the police found him, and he wasn't there, unfortunately. My entire class has no idea what happened, but I'd like to think that he's getting the help that he needs. Stay safe, everybody. Bodies in the road. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert of LA. The shortcut was a complete 2-lane road through total nothingness, except from passing through Amboy, California. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town, nearly as far below sea level as Death Valley, with a dormant volcano and a lava field on one side, and a salt flat on the other. It was also at the time a hotspot for satanic group activity. So, I was driving myself in the afternoon, so I stopped in Amboy and snapped a picture of the city sign just to prove that I was there for my friends who dared me to take the route I-40. I got back in my car and proceeded to drive up into the mountain between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top, I am driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I see stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach and slow down, I see a red Pontiac Ferrero stopped sideways across both lanes. A suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere, and two bodies laying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away, and the hair on the back of my neck is just standing up at this point. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out my 9mm pistol, and I chamber around. Something seems very, very wrong. It looked perfect, as if it were staged. An ambush? Was I being paranoid? Something was just wrong. Getting out of the car seemed unthinkable. It was like a horror movie. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive past the guys to the road on the left. I swerved to the right side of the woman behind the Ferrero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped into first gear and punched it and drove on the line just like I planned. I passed the back of the Ferrero without hitting it or either of the bodies on the road. I continued forward a couple 100 feet and slowed down so I can breathe and let my heart finally slow down. As I looked up into the rearview mirror, I saw the two bodies have gotten up to their knees, and 20 people or so emerged from the tall grass on each side of the road surrounding the bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed on the gas pedal. It did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East ramp. I will never know what will have happened to me if I got out of the car and checked on those bodies. Somehow, I do not think it would have been good. He wasn't the real mailman. When I was maybe 10 to 11, I was homesick from school and was on the couch watching TV when the doorbell rang. It was the mailman who told me that we had not gotten a package, but it was so big that I needed help carrying it. But I wasn't that old, but I knew right away something was wrong. I asked him where his truck was because I didn't see it parked out front. He kept telling me it was around the corner. I asked him why the regular mailman, who I always bought lollipops from, wasn't there, and I was told he was visiting family. He kept telling me to open the front door, but I politely told him I wasn't feeling well and I wasn't allowed to leave the house. I told him we would pick it up from the box at the post office, and he was telling me how much of a hassle that would be and how my mom would want me to do this for her as a favor. I told him that I would come outside, but I had to get my shoes from upstairs first. I closed the front door and I locked it. Then I ran through the house, locked the back door, and called my neighbor who worked from home. She was a close family friend, and I called her up screaming into the phone that she had to come over right now. Then I stood at the locked door and stared at the man from the window in the door. He saw me staring and yelled through the door, asking if I found my shoes. So I yelled to him. I called my neighbor to help me carry because I know she's older and stronger and she can help. He just turned around and ran. They never caught him. I always wondered if he ever managed to trick some other kid. The Haunted Warehouse. I work in a warehouse that my father purchased. He bought it for 25% of its cost from a farmer who seemed very excited to get rid of it. It is in the middle of Mennonite County with no neighbors for half a mile around. Look out the window and you see cornfields and scraggly trees. Cell service? Forget about it. There's absolutely none. You're alone, painting and preparing the front office portion for eventual functionality. To get to the front office, you must go through the hallway from the main warehouse into a secondary office and then through the door into the front. I frequently hear bumps and thuds and will occasionally go to the warehouse and feel air movement, but I've always attributed it to drafts and animal life in the roof. The only thing that ever makes me uneasy about this building is the fact that the door locks are reversed. Whoever installed these locks clearly didn't intend to keep people out. They intended to keep something in. I was in the front office when I began to hear the thudding. I ignored it and continued to apply masking tape to the door that I was working on, but this time it was accompanied by a screeching sound. Not loud, but audible. I was freaked out, but convinced myself that it was a pissed off raccoon or a squirrel that has found his way inside. I continued working until I heard the slam. The door to the secondary office has been opened. It sounded like it had been violently slammed shut. I peeked around the corner and saw that I was right. The secondary door was now closed. I tried to logic it through my head that a strong draft had sucked the door closed, although I knew there was no such draft. The thudding began again, closer this time. I've never been able to put a proximity on it, but now it sounded like it was right on the other side of the door. I froze, unsure of what was happening. My eyes locked on the door handle, which began to turn. The door disengaged its latch and slowly swung open, wider and wider. There was nothing there, nothing visible. No air movement, just quiet. So quiet, a quiet that seemed to overwhelm me with its presence. A quiet so thick, I could barely breathe. The quiet was shattered when a screech came again. This time, it was clearly pain, anger, and emanating from the main warehouse. The door slammed. That entirely broke my frozen, fearful state. I ran. I got in my car and I drove until there was cell range to call my father. He didn't believe anything about the doors closing, but I agreed that the building had something weird about it. He told me he'd be right out. We fast forward half an hour. My dad and I had met up and drove back to the warehouse. I showed him the door that slammed, showing him that it was separated from both the front office and the main warehouse, so no draft could have closed it. I told him about the thuds, the screeching, the sudden quiet that overcame the building. He decided that we should check the main warehouse. Emboldened by his presence, I led the way. Something that you should know about this warehouse: it was formerly a furniture manufacturing place owned by a Mennonite farmer. They made a handful of chairs, tables, etc. because of all the cutting that went on. The floor is thickly coated with dust. We walked into the warehouse and saw nothing out of the ordinary, just dust was untouched, the doors were closed, the windows were locked. The only thing out of the ordinary was just one of the hanging fluorescent light fixtures. It was hanging askew and swaying slightly. Insisting that we take a look at the mount to ensure that it didn't just break loose, my dad grabbed a stepladder. He supported it while I climbed up and grabbed the swinging light. I looked on top of the light and saw a handprint. A single, fresh, inhumanely large handprint. No footprints in the dust around the light. No signs of his presence. I climbed down and switched places with my father. He saw it and said, "What the hell? There's been no one here for years." He climbed down and told me he'd been suspicious of someone breaking in and stealing parts from the warehouse light system. He couldn't believe me that this wasn't human, that something was not right here. The last thing he said was, "There's nothing here. We just gotta go back to work." And then, as if just to show its presence, the thud returned. This time, it wasn't just a thud, but it was more of an earthquake. The entire building felt like it had moved. The heartbeat-like thud was then overlaid by the screech, the awful, awful screech. It felt like it was coming from the walls themselves. We ran, and we haven't returned. My father hired somebody to finish my job and has since moved into the office. He's heard the thudding, but thus far, nothing has happened further. What actually happened? I don't know, nor else do I care. What I do know is there is something paranormal in that building, and the man who sold it to us knew. I'll never forget the sound of that lock turning by itself, or the feeling of that deafening silence. Hey, if you made it to the end of the video, I really appreciate it. On screen, there is going to be an email. If any of you have any stories, you are more than welcome to send them to me. I would love to listen to them and read them out in the video. That'd be great. But I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in my next one.